Slovenia is a small country with 2 million population, and it has also relatively small media outlets. That means that they are also relatively weak. So any government measure that cuts either a funding from any sort of tenders or financing of public broadcaster or financing of public press agency poses an immediate threat. And that is the situation that we do have right now. We've had dangerous developments in all three aspects. We see a threat to public broadcaster, we see a complete cut of funding for Slovenian press agency, which is even more problematic because Slovenia is of course taking over the presidency of Council of European Union, and Slovenian press agency is supposed to be the key pillar of the informing both Slovenian and international audience about the events. And then of course we also have all sort of dangers to the private media, not just through tenders, but also through other calls or other possibilities. For example, state advertising, advertising from state-controlled companies, tenders for frequencies, all sort of related businesses where we have media companies that are owned, for example, by construction company. And in this situation, of course, the owners can see repercussions in other fields where the sort of financial threat is even bigger for them. So of course we do see that sort of institutional threat in terms of financing and in terms of draft media laws. On the other hand, we also see personal threats, personal trolling of various journalists, editors, particularly female journalists are a target and a sort of consistent target of this government, of their public relations officers, of government-related media, etc. We have seen 4 draft laws presented by this government last year. They did not provide any solution to the Slovenian media landscape. They did not provide anything constructive. In fact, they wanted to take away millions of euros from Slovenian public broadcaster. They wanted to take out the key private broadcasters from cable operations and from cable distribution, and they wanted to disband a large commercial radio network. So these were all very personal sort of attacks on specific media simply because they were critical of the government.
You were part of a commission, I believe, that drafted media laws previously.
Yes.
What is the change?
I was twice a part of the team that tried to prepare the draft media laws. However, these draft laws during the previous 10 or 15 years were not later either submitted to the parliament or not adopted. They tried to foresee some solutions for the media, particularly regarding, for example, the danger of concentration of media ownership, hidden media ownership, and many other untransparencies. I've been talking about these issues for the last 20 years, and yet many of these aspects have not been raised in Slovenian laws. It seems that many governments had a sort of attempted to actually help their media owners, so to speak, to be hidden or to be obscure or to be somehow lost in some sort of post box offices somewhere in Luxembourg or Cyprus. And that is what we attempted. The current draft media laws provided no solution to the aspect of the media ownership.
How are the financial structures of the media actually changing? How big is the involvement of Hungarian funds or so on?
We see an increasing entrance of the Hungarian funds and Hungarian owners in Slovenia, where all of these owners are in one way or another very closely related to the Hungarian regime of Viktor Orban. That's why it seems that these owners don't have economic motives and economic incentives, but are simply trying to help Slovenian government and its ruling party SDS. With the help of these Hungarian investors and also with some party funding, SDS as a party has established more than 20 media outlets in the last few years. These are relatively small media outlets, and yet they simply repeat and amplify the message that this party wants to be seen and wants to be heard. They also control the largest website in the country, which is owned by Slovenian Telecom. And here we see a similar pattern as we see, for example, in Serbia. President Vučić in Serbia is well known for using Serbian Telecom for many of his media plans, including obstructing opposition media, opposition TV channels such as N1 in those cable networks. And we see a similar pattern here. The sale of this largest website has been stopped last week, simply because the Hungarian investors gave a rather weak economic offer. They offered just 2 million euros. And on the other side, there was an offer by a multinational corporation, United Group, which is operating also in Serbia, and it's not exactly on friendly terms with President Vučić. So it was very clear that, of course, Mr. Vučić will not, and his ally, Mr. Jansa, will not support the sale of this website to such an owner, and they will not let the website be sold to anybody else except for the Hungarian investors. And this has actually happened. We are at a very weak position for the media freedom, for the freedom of democracy here in Slovenia. We have seen in the last few months an increasing number of attacks on journalists, on verbal attacks, trolling attacks on journalists, but also on all other aspects of democratic institutions. For example, Constitutional Court, prosecution, Court of Audit, and many other people, including famous chefs, for example. As soon as anybody raises any criticism of this government, he or she is sort of aware or needs to be aware that this person will be very brutally attacked on social media, but also in the media that is either owned by a ruling party or the media that is controlled by this government. And in a way, that is, of course, a great threat to the democracy in this great country.